This incident served as the beginning of the end of the British Empire. It is 13th April 1919, and a group of protesters gather in Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. Yet, unknown to the protesters who were gathered to seek the independence of India, what happened next was about to shake the whole world and actually leave a mark as one of the darkest days in the history of India. Not so many people know this story. Hence, I call it the untold real story of the independence struggle of India. This was a gathering full of children, women, old people. However, this demographic information did not actually matter to the brutal general who was actually on duty for the British that day, General Dyer. For what many do not know, Dyer, even though a British, was actually born and bred in India, so he could even speak some of the local languages. Yet, on this particular day, something amazing happened. General Dyer, acting with the command of General Udham, marched in with the soldiers to this peaceful protest ground. Without any warning upon arriving at this particular space, General Dyer commanded his army to open fire on these innocent protesters. This was a massacre which shook the foundation of Indian independence struggle. For the British, it was all about teaching Indians a lesson so that no one would dare rise against British rule. And back home, General Dyer was actually seen as a hero and celebrated as someone who actually was fighting or actually fought for the cause of his country. The British actually reported this massacre brushing off its true brutality by actually reporting the dead to be around 300. But from the Indian perspective, the death toll was actually more than 1,000 people. With an enclosed place of this nature and nowhere to go, people tried to escape, but they kept shooting. And according to the accounts of the general himself, during an inquiry years later after the incident, they kept killing everybody until the army ran out of ammunition. Lots of the people gathered there had to jump into wells because there was no way of escape, because it just took this narrow path to enter the place. And according to General Dyer, had this place not been narrow, he would have entered the space with his armored vehicle.
Supposing the passage was sufficient for the armored cars to go in, would you have fired with the machine guns?
I think probably yes.
This incident left a big scar on the British, so much that even after over 100 years after this incident, the British Prime Minister and some other members of Parliament in Britain actually called for an official, unequivocal apology to India over 100 years after the event.
Mr. Speaker, the tragedy of Jallianwala Bagh in 1919 is a shameful scar on British Indian history. We deeply regret what happened and the suffering caused.
I think the people, in memory of those that lost their lives and the brutality of what happened, deserve a full, clear and unequivocal apology for what took place on that occasion.
It is the impulse of the story that served the basis of the movie Sadar Udham. This movie was actually recommended to me by one of my subscribers by name Diogiri Yadav. Actually recommended and pushed me to watch Sadar Udham. This film is actually well shot and the cinematography is really very awesome. Every frame, in my opinion, mostly almost looks like a painting, and that for me makes for great cinematography in movies. The acting in the film is actually top-notch, as most of the actors, especially the guy playing the character of Sardar Udham or Udham Singh, actually nailed the whole character. Now, where does Sadar Udham as a character fit into the true story or the real life story of the Amritsar massacre? One part of the story that I did not tell you right from the beginning was that during the day of this particular massacre, this guy actually lost his girlfriend to the massacre. And hours after the whole thing happened, people were left there to die because it had entered into curfew time and nobody dare defy the orders of Dyer and go back there to rescue the dead bodies. However, Udham Singh sneaked into this particular place and started looking for survivors. They managed to find people who were still lying in the pool of blood but were not dead several hours after the incident. They actually sent them to nearby houses with a lot of local healers coming in to help resuscitate most of these guys who were not dead yet. And eventually, Udham Singh actually finds his girlfriend among the dead bodies. It is at this point that he swore to himself that he was definitely going to avenge the death of his girlfriend and any other Indian who lost their lives at that particular scene. Hence, for the remaining part of his life, Udham Singh makes it a point to kill General Dyer, since he was the one who actually ordered for the killing. Years later, after General Dyer and General Dyer had all left India, Udham Singh still made it a point to keep to his promise. Hence, he left India by going through Russia as a fugitive and still again finding his way into the United Kingdom. Whilst at the United Kingdom, he actually searches for General Dyer and becomes his driver and bodyguard at the same time. He eventually follows him around until the day when he finally has the opportunity where he goes to the stage and shoots Dyer on the day when he actually went on stage again to defend all his actions and why his commander, General Dyer, should be seen as a national hero. This in real sense infuriates Udham Singh, and he actually goes there and succeeds in his mission to finally killing Dyer. The British government arrests him and he's kept on trial, but of course, we all know that his fate was already determined before he was brought into the court. Something amazing transpired in the court scene, which for me till now gives me goosebumps and makes me shiver every time I watch such a scene. After Udham Singh delivered a very powerful speech in the court in front of the media, they were actually asked to paint him as a terrorist and as a non-revolutionalist and as a guy who was just a random killer. And even the court had the impetus to order all the media gathered in the court not to report or say any word about Sadar Udham and some of the revolutionary things that he had said against the British Empire.
Under orders of the court, the press would not report on any statements made by the accused.
Over 100 years on, for me, this keeps ringing a bell because most governments are still using the same techniques of oppressing people. We might not really be under colonial rule, but for me, most of these things have been reincarnated in different ways. And that is why all the scenes and everything that is portrayed in this particular movie of Sadar Udham is actually going to be a timeless film. The music in the film actually helps to corroborate the whole scenes and helping you, putting you into the whole mood. Hence, the soundcore, I would really say, is really very good. Everything in this movie was actually working in tandem in achieving the intended effect. Even the costumes and the locations, my God, especially the locations, were really mind-blowing. And I dove my heart in actual sense to all the movie producers, all the people behind the making of this film. Before I proceed to tell you what happens next with Udham Singh, you guys might think that whatever happened in India was actually an isolated story. Let me take you so many miles down to a place called the Gold Coast, which was also another British colony. In a famous rioting that occurred in the Gold Coast, which later became famously known as the 1948 riots. And for me, this mirrored exactly the tenets and the ingredients and everything that led to the Amritsar massacre. The British actually recruited soldiers from the Gold Coast, which was one of their colonies, and the soldiers from my country, which is the Gold Coast and now known as Ghana, fought side by side with the British. Before the war, these soldiers were actually promised that when they come back, they were going to get salary increment, and the people of the Gold Coast were actually going to be given much more higher representation in the House of Representatives or the Parliament and the general running of affairs of the colony. However, to their dismay, when the soldiers returned from the war, the British never kept to their promise. Hence, on this fateful day, the ex-servicemen came together on a peaceful march to go deliver their petition to the governor, outlining their grievances and the fact that all their allowances and all the promises that the British made to them had not been fulfilled after they returned from the war. Unknown to them, most of them met their death. At a place called the Christianborg Crossroad in the capital town of the Gold Coast known as Accra, the ex-servicemen were asked to stop and not proceed. But the ex-soldiers insisted that they were peacefully coming just to deliver their petition to the governor. However, as peaceful as they were and as unarmed, just like in the case of Amritsar, they opened fire on them, killing 3 of them, Private Odate, Corporal Atipwe, and Sir Akokosa. All lost their lives on that fateful day, with several other ex-servicemen wounded. This incident served as the beginning of the end of the British Empire in the Gold Coast. And learning about the Amritsar massacre from the Sardar Udham movie, it became so clear to me that with all British colonies, certain patterns and certain points of convergence can be drawn from the way they operated in most of these colonies. And again, just as the same way that gatherings were actually outlawed in India, just so that people do not come together to actually demand for independence, a similar law with the same magnitude was actually also being implemented in my own home country right here in Gold Coast, which is now known as Ghana. This is clear that the empire actually had a motive and they actually had a blueprint to which they governed all their colonies. Now, let me take you back to Amritsar and let's continue the Sadar Udham story. The costume was great, the acting was top-notch, the cinematography, and again, even the pacing of the film was really that good. So if you look at the editing part of the film, it was really that top-notch and really mind-blowing. I would really suggest that you take your time and do watch this film if you haven't watched it before. Depicting the scenes of the shooting in the movie, I saw someone ask a question which I thought was very valid. The person said, even though General Dyer is actually a white man ordering the shooting, those actually doing the execution or the shooting themselves are actually Indian soldiers. Why is this? Why are people of their own kind actually obeying instructions from their superior? To understand this, let's travel further several years after that incident, looking into Milgram's experiment. Bedeviled by massacres and how other human beings can be so heartless to actually kill others and give an excuse of the fact that they were simply taking orders, Stanley Milgram decided to investigate this matter in his very famous Milgram experiment of obedience. In this experiment, Stanley Milgram had brought together respondents who in turn deliver shock to students. And to the dismay of the world during this experiment, a lot of the people who were brought in to act as the teachers actually ended up delivering the highest form of electric shock in the name of the fact that Stanley Milgram was the one giving the orders, and so they were simply following orders. By the success rate of this experiment, Milgram had successfully proven that people can actually act callously just because they receive an order from their superior. And for me, this same thing explains the Amritsar massacre. This is the most difficult video I've ever made. And I just didn't think I would have made it to the end because the atrocities that are depicted in this film are so gruesome. If you are seeing my face for the very first time, welcome. This is the African Amaze channel. Over here, I do talk about cinematography, photography, editing, and all its related branches. I also watch and talk about movies and other movie industries all across the globe. And that is how we learn filmmaking on this channel. If all this sounds interesting, I do much appreciate it if you do click on the subscribe button. Please make sure to do turn on the post notification bell so you are notified anytime I drop awesome content like this right here from the continent of Africa. Just before I leave, this channel is mostly full of energy with making things disappear when we do reviews like this. I mean, having lots of fun, but this topic is so strong that I broke down in the making of this video. Watch my review on RRR, and I'll catch you later, as always. Until next time, keep practicing filmmaking. Peace out.